Just about everyone agreed that when initiating sex feels free, everyone benefits. One pattern I noticed from the responses is that in many marriages, one person does almost all the initiating but wishes things were more balanced.
You're listening to Get Your Marriage On, the fun and spicy podcast bringing you new tools and fresh ideas so that you can be the sexiest couple you know.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin, I just want to cover a few quick announcements. First of all, thank you for participating in our International Lovemaking Day celebration. If you weren't aware, for the last 9 days through the Intimately Us app, you could complete challenges to earn points, and from there, be entered into drawings to win one of many wonderful prizes for you and your spouse and everything. I hope this has been a great time for you and your spouse to draw closer together. The second announcement is we have our marriage retreat coming up in October. You can find more details on our website. This is a 3-day, 3-night romantic retreat. You and your spouse get your own cabin. It's up in the mountains. And I'm partnering with my really good friend and marriage and sex intimacy coach, Amanda Lauder, to put this on. It's going to be really in-depth. It's going to be transformative, and we're going to cover so many wonderful topics. All those details are on our website, and I hope to see you there. If you like this podcast, will you please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast app? You can just, on your iPhone, hit the podcast app, find Get Your Marriage On, and then leave a review. This is what JNABUG84, thank you, whoever you are, said recently. This is a fantastic podcast full of fun, spicy, exciting things about marriage. I love all the tips given from numerous experts, and the way everything is talked about on here is in a classy and fun way. Well, thank you very much for that, JNABUG84. So it was a late Wednesday night a few months ago. My oldest child, who's 17 years old, was in my room. He was nervous and anxious about how to ask a girl in his class out for a date. It's one of his school's dances. I think it was prom or something like that. We brainstormed ways he could ask her, and he spent hours preparing a creative way to ask her. He was worried about how his asking would go because, this is his first, real date. What she's going to say in return and so on. It was kind of fun as a parent to watch my son go through this experience. And in a strange way, those emotions that he was going through felt strangely familiar to me. Because every sexual encounter requires at least one of you to initiate. Without someone initiating, there's no sexual encounter. Initiating sex can be a very powerful way to communicate love and desire to your spouse. Initiating is a powerful bid for connection. It's a way of saying, I want to connect with you. Initiating can be very intimate, and it's very validating to be wanted sexually. We've certainly had our struggles, and from the many messages that I received from you, I'm happy to report that I am not alone. I've been thinking a lot about improving initiating sex for a while, and I thought this would make for a great podcast episode. So to prepare for this episode, I ran an informal survey on our Instagram, asking my followers to get a better idea of what other couples struggle with when it comes to initiating. The answers were enlightening, and I saw several patterns in the responses. Just about everyone agreed that when initiating sex feels free, everyone benefits. One pattern I noticed from the responses is that in many marriages, one person does almost all the initiating but wishes things were more balanced. 26% of the respondents said they don't enjoy initiating sex, while 80% said they love it when their spouse initiates sex. It feels really good to be wanted sexually. And when the burden of initiating feels one-sided, in other words, you feel like you're always the one asking for it, it's easy to wonder if the other person wants you back in the same way. Some other patterns I noticed were a lot of hesitancy to initiate out of fear of rejection. Others don't like it when their spouse initiates because they feel pressured to say yes, even if they're not in the mood. Others feel pressure to perform when being asked for sex. In some marriages, the person with the higher desire put all of the responsibility to initiate on the lower desire spouse, thinking it would reduce the pressure surrounding sex. but all it did was shift the pressure from one person to the other. It actually didn't solve any problems. I figured it would be easy to talk about some tactics or tools such as schedule it or have some sort of physical item in your bedroom that you both agree on to indicate you're both in the mood. And to be honest, it'd be fun to compile such a list, and I'm all for methods that work for individuals. But just prescribing a tactic without understanding the underlying reasons why initiating sex is hard is as absurd as an optometrist giving you a pair of her glasses without giving you an eye exam first to understand what your prescription even should be. So, below are some ideas I found that might help you understand yourself and your marriage dynamic better so that you can find more freedom in initiating sex. And more initiation means more opportunities for great sex, which leads to a stronger marriage. So here we go. The first idea I have around making initiating sex more free for you and your marriage is to increase your intimacy tolerance. What? You might say. It doesn't sound sexy at all to think that intimacy is something you tolerate. Well, yes, let me explain what I mean. The reason why initiating is hard is because sex is inherently intimate, and intimacy can be scary sometimes. Intimacy is all about a desire to know the other person deeply, as well as a willingness to be known deep down. Being known deep down is scary because it's exposing, it's opening yourself up to another person. Letting someone that matters a lot to you into your heart always involves some risk. Sometimes we prefer the safety and security of the status quo and not rocking the boat over the risk of sharing what we really think, what we really want to do, and how we feel with our spouse. It's scary to be fully honest and share our heart because there's always a chance that they might not like everything they see or everything they hear from us. We like to be validated, and the invalidation of our desires hurts. So, some marriages just live beneath their privileges and stay small by keeping things safe at the expense of passion. This might also mean not initiating sex as often because of its inherent risk of being rejected. But anything of value in life involves some risk with, good balance with relationship safety, of course. People have sex up to the limit of the intimacy they can tolerate, meaning the quality of your sex life can't progress beyond your current ability to be grounded within yourself while also being more emotionally connected with your spouse. I recently coached a wonderful couple that was stuck. They hit their intimacy tolerance limit and couldn't figure out how to move past it, and they were miserable. What was frustrating to them was that not more than a year prior, they made huge strides in their marriage and sex life. They were listening to podcasts together, working through past hang-ups, experiencing new things together, and growing closer together as a result. Then they hit a bump in their relationship. One spouse wanted more, and the other person felt like they were just taking without giving or being considerate. In a short time, it felt like they lost all that progress that they had made in the previous year. They each put up walls and were both hurt. The spouse that typically initiated stopped doing so, blaming the other person for stopping their efforts in progressing together as a couple. They wondered what was wrong with their marriage, especially after a few months of great growth. They were still very committed to each other, and they wanted help working through this issue. There's actually nothing wrong with their marriage per se. It's just that they had hit the limit of the intimacy they're capable of having as a couple. All they needed to do was to figure out how they got to that point in the first place, make repairs, and then they could keep growing as a couple. It would take some courage on both of their parts to change some of their habits that had gotten into that bad cycle in the first place. Marriages are like a system. Things happen in cycles, and this was their cycle. One of them didn't like to be rejected or disappointed. This person usually excelled and was really good at his job and getting everything they wanted. When the other person felt like things were too much and needed a break, the first person took it personally as a rejection and then withdrew. The withdrawal made the second person upset and offended, and then they dug their heels in even deeper to resist the first person's advances. This in turn made the first person withdraw even more, and so this cycle continued. The friction from the problems you face in your marriage are just exposing the limits of your capacity for intimacy as a couple. It starts to make more sense when you understand that your sexual desire problems or frustrations regarding initiating sex in marriage are just a result of the patterns and cycles operating in your marriage. However, sometimes you might need a neutral third party to help you see these cycles and patterns so that you can get out of them. Through coaching, this couple was able to become more aware of their cycle that was keeping them stuck. Once they could see the problem, they could then see their way out. They were courageous at changing their habits that kept them stuck, and in a few short weeks, they were able to work through their issues and break through their current limits regarding intimacy and to expand to newer heights of deeper intimacy, which led to a more exciting and fulfilling sex life. The second idea I have about making initiating sex feel more free is to remember that you always have a choice. Sometimes we feel like we have to have sex when our spouse initiates, or we feel guilty for saying no or guilty when we're not in the mood as often. On the flip side, sometimes we hesitate to even initiate because of past experiences that you won't get a validating response. There are many couples who had a lot of desire for each other before they were married, like when they were dating and things are free and fun. But once they were married, sexual desire plummets. It dropped out suddenly. Because before they were married, sex was forbidden and there were no shoulds. Desire came easy for them. But now that they're married, they've promised themselves to their spouse and feel obligated to have sex. In fact, some individuals exploit this sense of obligation in their spouse to extract the kind of sex they're hoping to get too. But this sense of obligation never creates desire or intimacy because when you feel obligated, you feel like you don't really have a choice in the matter. And that is antithetical to wanting and desiring sex. The solution is to remember that no matter what, you always have a choice. The deeper you can embrace the fact that you always have a choice in how you show up in your marriage, the more desire you'll have and the easier it is for you to be receptive when your spouse initiates sex. The same goes for the person initiating. Pressuring your spouse to have sex with you out of guilt or obligation puts your marriage in a cycle where freedom is diminished. You might get sex if you pressure enough, but it won't be what you really want, genuine connection. But it's risky. Wanting genuine connection is risky because to let your spouse fully choose whether or not to engage with you sexually will mean there's always going to be a possibility that they may not choose you. I like the story of Disney's Beauty and the Beast because I think it illustrates this principle really well. The Beast realizes that Belle is the one person capable of breaking his curse. She has to fall in love with him before the last rose petal falls. At first, he tries to compel her to come to dinner or do things with her to make her fall in love with him. And guess what? None of those methods worked. Once he had the courage to get solid within himself and to give Belle a little more freedom, their relationship blossomed. The critical part in the story in the movie is when the very last rose petal is about to fall and Belle finds out that her father is in danger. And the Beast lets her go, risking staying stuck with his curse forever. And everyone in the castle is like, "What are you doing, Beast? You let her go." But because this is Disney, of course it has a happy ending. And what's magical, I think, is Belle freely chooses to return to the castle to defend the Beast on her own accord. She made the choice. Having that freedom to make that choice makes all the difference. Now, there are going to be times when you're not in the mood, but your spouse wants to have sex with you. Rather than flat out saying no, a stronger response might be, "I am tired. The kids need baths. This laundry needs to be folded, and I'm having a hard time getting there mentally. But perhaps you can assist with these things because that will help me have more mental space. And I'll try to get there mentally, and then we'll see what we can do." The third idea I have for giving you more freedom in initiating sex is to consider the kind of sex you're offering. When Emily and I went through our relationship renaissance a few years ago, I got really vulnerable and asked her one night what it was like for her to have sex with me. I wanted to know the truth, even if it hurt. But that's a powerful question. Ask your spouse, what is it like for you to have sex with me? There are times in our marriage where the kind of sex I was offering when I'd initiate wasn't going to be great sex for her. So when she said no, it was for a really good reason. She was declining bad sex. These were usually times when I was needy for sex, which was thinly disguised as a desire to connect with her. Anyway, she could see right through it from a mile away. There are many reasons why people engage sexually. It's not always just about connection and pleasure. Sometimes your spouse wants to have sex with you to try to make you feel a certain way or make you feel happy. Sometimes they want to have sex with you out of fear that if they don't engage sexually, you'll stray. Sometimes the sex is very one-sided, with little regard for the other person's pleasure or comfort. Imagine what it would be like if the kind of sex you're offering is good, so good in fact, that you'd be crazy to turn it down, even if you know you have to get up again in 4 hours. Sex at this level is far more than just orgasms or mastering certain techniques or sex acts. It's about bringing your whole heart to the encounter. It's moving. It's the meanings involved that are full of passion, cherishing, and adoration. It's when you make love with your whole heart and not just your body. Part of offering good sex is to get better at understanding where your spouse is at. For the sake of example, let's say there are 5 levels of sexual interest. Level 1 is no interest at all, and level 5 is do me now. You might be at level 3 or 4 at a particular moment, but your spouse is at a 1 or a 2. So if you approach them like as if they were at a 4 when they're at a 1, things aren't going to go over very well. A better approach is to get a sense of what level they're at and invite them to go up 1 level with you. One of our favorite lines we learned from a sex therapist is to ask, "So, honey, what sounds pleasurable for you tonight?" I like this because this is about meeting each other at their level. It sets the expectation that sex may or may not happen, but if anything, we want to engage in helping each other level up from where they are. Sometimes this means I get to brush Emily's beautiful hair. Sometimes this means watching a show or talking about our day without distractions. Sometimes this means going on an evening walk, or sometimes it means something more intimate than that. The 4th idea I have for you about finding more freedom in initiating sex is to get educated on sexual desire patterns. A few days ago, I coached a couple where the husband wanted sex a lot, like 5 times a week. The wife, not so much. This difference in desire was causing friction in their relationship. He thought about sex all the time and thought something must be wrong with her that she didn't think about sex as much. He took it as a rejection of him. The truth was she liked sex when they had it. It was fun and pleasurable for her too. But she didn't think about it as often as he did. In the book Come As You Are by Dr. Emily Nagoski, who's a sex educator and researcher, she explains research around sexual desire patterns. You may have heard of these, spontaneous and responsive desire patterns. She says about 75% of men and 15% of women from her research experience sexual desire that it feels more spontaneous. That's where you can go from idea to desire very quickly. The husband, in this case of this couple I coach, experiences spontaneous desire. By the way, this is the desire pattern that's often depicted by female roles in Hollywood movies. But the vast reality is that the majority of women don't experience that type of spontaneous desire for sex. What's more common for women, and some men too, especially those in long-term committed relationships, is responsive desire. Being one with the responsive desire is actually really good. It's not a curse at all. It's actually a very terrific way of relating to your sexual desire. Responsive desire pattern is when desire for sex shows up after you're already engaging in something arousing or erotic. It's like not realizing how hungry you are until you have a delicious meal served in front of you. You weren't thinking about food until you started eating. You take a taste and then your body says, oh yeah, I like that. I want more of that. If you're the one with a responsive desire pattern, this may mean that you need to put more mental effort into desiring sex, or at least a willingness to get there mentally. I like to run, but frankly, some mornings I don't feel like it. But I put on my running clothes and shoes anyway, and I get out the door. But once I get myself out the door and I start moving my body and loosening up, it feels great. And when I'm done with my run, I'm glad that I ran and wonder what was the issue in the first place. I know a woman that intentionally put alarms on her phone to remind her periodically to think a sexy thought. She purposely listened to content that got her thinking more about sex, and she cultivated her eroticism through it. She decided to make going there mentally a priority for her, and her body followed suit. And now she lives at a higher sexual level and is much more ready to engage with her spouse sexually as a result. There's a problem that I see often that you should be aware of, like one couple I coached a while ago. In their marriage, she had the higher desire, spontaneous pattern, while her husband was responsive and lower desire for sex. She decided that initiating sex is full of rejection and hurt, and she wondered if she was sexy enough for her husband, and took his lack of sexual interest in her personally. She craved that he would just initiate more often and want to engage in more foreplay. So out of frustration, she decided to stop initiating altogether. She thought if she stopped initiating, her husband would step up and fill the void. She thought he would realize what he's missing and then will start engaging more. But as you might guess, things actually didn't quite work out that way. Remember, he is more responsive when it comes to sex. He doesn't easily think about it unless something sexually arousing or erotic is already going on. By her waiting for him to make that first move when he's more responsive, she's going to be waiting a very long time before her desire finally comes around to him. Of course, he could make an effort to intentionally think about it more often and put his mind to it, trusting his body will follow after. And to be fair, both of them have a part to play in the dynamic that they've co-created. But without changing the system or cycle they're in, it's a mistake to think that her husband would all of a sudden start initiating more just because she stopped. Sometimes couples will intentionally tell the lower desire spouse that it's all on them to initiate. The higher desire spouse is sick of the pressure to initiate and the risk of getting turned down. So they think if the one with the lower desire is responsible for all the initiating, the one with the higher desire will naturally always say yes, so there's less chance of rejection. The higher desire spouse thinks it's a virtuous move because he hates asking for sex when she's not in the mood, thinking he's making her feel bad or pressured to give in out of duty or obligation. They figure if the only time they have sex is when she's in the mood, they'll both avoid hurt feelings. In the short term, this might feel great. The lower desire spouse finally thinks that they're free from the obligation of responding to the higher desire's sexual overtures. They might think that they have total control now over when sex is going to happen in the relationship. However, the spouse with the higher desire sits back, wondering when the lower desire spouse will initiate. It might be days, weeks, or months without the lower desire spouse initiating at all. He'll wonder what's going on and get upset that their new agreement isn't working. What's really going on under the hood in this situation is it's actually not solving any problems. All it did was shift the pressure from one person to the other. It took the pressure to initiate off of the higher desire spouse and transferred it to the lower desire spouse. And when you feel pressure to perform sexually, it's the opposite of feeling free. It feels more like the brake pedal is being pressed. This further dampens any sexual desire to initiate. So it's easier not to initiate at all. A better solution would be to work together to address the underlying causes of frustration for initiating sex and desire differences in the relationship. It will take courage to realize both people play a part in the dynamic that they've co-created. By the way, it's so easy just to point the finger to the other person, but that just masks the issues. Remember, both people have a part to play in any relationship. You co-construct the marriage you're in. But from there, you can find ways to reduce pressure rather than just transferring it from one person to the other. And you can get creative here. Okay, now let's talk about some black belt initiation tips. Let's say you've worked through your issues around initiating, and you're ready for more intimate and heartfelt connection. The sex you're offering is awesome, and your encounters are heartfelt and full of deep meaning and passion. You've worked through your desire pattern styles and differences and found ways to reduce negative pressure for sex in your relationship. So, how do you make initiating sex more fun? Well, I'm glad you asked, because here are 10 ideas you can try. Ready? Number 1, Dance in the kitchen. Turn on some romantic music and take your spouse by the hand and start dancing. It's romantic and breaks up the monotony of kitchen chores, especially if the invitation to dance is unexpected. If you need some music options, you can just head over to YouTube and search romantic music. Idea number 2, give a massage. Romance and relaxation usually precede great sex. So what can you do to help your spouse relax while enjoying some romance? Why not help your spouse relax by offering a massage? If you're not quite sure how to give a great massage, there's a fantastic website called couplesmassagecourses.com, and it's got fantastic resources on how to give your spouse a wonderful massage. Idea number 3, schedule it. Make an appointment. You make appointments to get your hair done, visit the doctor or dentist or other important things in your life. Why not schedule sex on the calendar too? In fact, if you both use electronic calendars such as Google Calendar, send your spouse a calendar invite. They'll get a notification for this steamy event that you've planned. Idea number 4, write a sticky note and hide it where they'll find it. Write that you're in the mood on a sticky note and hide it where they'll see it later, such as on the bathroom mirror, in the car, or my favorite, under the lid of the toilet seat in the master bathroom. Idea number 5, clean the bedroom. This suggestion to clean and tidy up the bedroom may not sound super sexy, but hear me out. There's something special about stepping into a clean room that puts your mind at ease, helping you relax. And it can also be a great way to express love and desire for the other person. Number 6, offer to brush her hair or massage his scalp. Many women say they like it when their husbands brush their hair. Men like their scalp massage too. It's relaxing, feels great, and can be quite affectionate. Idea number 7, take the initiative to schedule a date night, including finding a babysitter if needed. When my wife and I were in our early years of marriage, getting out of the house together regularly on a date night was really difficult. Finding a babysitter, an activity we could both enjoy and afford, and dealing with busy schedules with work and other obligations made it easy for us just to skip date night. But precisely because of the sacrifice it took for us to pull off our date nights, made them more precious and valuable to us. Scheduling a date night is a great way to initiate sex because it's a way of saying the other person matters and that they're worth the effort and time and expense and sacrifice it took to actually get out and be a couple. Idea number 8, share the mental load. There's an often invisible, never-ending running to-do list in many women's minds because in most households, woman carries the majority of the load for the household. It can include little things that she's keeping track of, such as the laundry, kids' projects, shopping lists, and more. This mental load adds constant pressure to her sexual availability as well. Offer to take over chunks of things about living together so that you share the load better. For example, decide who's going to take over the laundry, or the shopping, or the kids' schooling, and other burdens. If you're more interested in this topic, check out episode number 50 of the Get Your Marriage On podcast. We do a deep dive with Dr. Morgan Cutlip about sharing the mental load. Tip number 9, send a steamy text. A text message is a great way to get your spouse's engines going. For some steamy text ideas, check out the Just Between Us app or the Intimately Us app. Idea number 10, invite your spouse to shower with you. Hey, you're both going to need to shower sometime anyway, so surprise them by hopping in the shower together. Offer to soap them up and be sure to have lots of touching. For some extra credit, you can get some silicone lube, which is usually shower safe, that you can keep in the shower. It's water resistant, so it stays on you even underwater. Anyway, if you'd like more suggestions, we wrote a mini ebook about initiating sex with over 100 creative ideas, and you can find them by going to getyourmarriageon.com. Click on products and go to Guides to Better Sex. Anyway, thank you for listening. I hope the ideas discussed today help you and your spouse have more freedom when it comes to initiating sex in your marriage. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends, and I promise they will thank you for life.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Get Your Marriage On. And if you did, we would love it if you would take a few seconds to give us a rating on iTunes and to share the show with your friends. They'll thank you for life. Once you've done that, you can head over to getyourmarriageon.com for more resources about today's topic and to download our amazing marriage apps. Now go get your marriage on.